was constantly acting when he got a clue in his mind. When there is an idea in your mind, are you prepared to act on it based on your inner resolve? Hello and welcome to your Voice of Awakening with Martin K. Toluhi. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We started a new series on Destiny Shaping Awakening in our last episode, and we looked at the life of Gideon, a story of a young man who took a common moment and transformed it to destiny shaping moment. He was able to bring about an awareness, an alignment, and of course an advancement, consequently bringing about the changing of his own nation. I promised I was going to bring you a second story, and it's a story straight out of the Bible from one of the parables of Jesus. And in this story, you'll find the story of a young man who was keenly aware of his rights to his own inheritance with his father, yet he was yet to come to that awakening to the responsibility that goes with the consequences of his own action. And he was going to have to go through a series of life-transforming moments that would bring him to a place of awakening that would transform his life and bring about the next chapter of his life. Now, this parable is often referred to as the parable of the prodigal son, but I prefer to call it a parable of self-awakening, because that was what happened, I would argue, with a young man. So let's take the account and see what the story says. And that is taken from the book of Luke chapter 15 verses 1 through to 20. It says, "Then Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the young son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in desolate living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to the citizen of that country, who sent him into his field to feed pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything." Verse 17 brought about the transformation. "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but I am here dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion, and he ran and put his arms around him and kissed him." So far the scripture. So we see here an account of a young man who had an awareness of his rights to his inheritance, and father wouldn't relent in giving him what belonged to him, and he went away to live in another country. It was said that he wasn't careful enough as to the way he invested his money, and he spent his money, and he wasted all his own asset and his own inheritance and all that he had received that was rightfully his. So he had not learned the responsibility of his own action, but he was aware of what was his, and he laid claim to what was his. However, scripture says in verse 17, "And he came to himself." He came to a moment of personal awakening that brought about his awareness of his own state and what could happen and what change was awaiting him. He did something with that awakening and that awareness, and that's what I want us to do. As we unpack this story, there are 3 lessons that I believe will help us to harness our moment, no matter how bad they may be or no matter how great they may be, we can always transcend the level of accomplishment that we have come to at every moment of our lives. So let's unpack and let's see. The first thing that happened was an awakening to the power of self-talk. You realize that this young man came to himself in verse 17, and when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants had bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger. He said, I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, have sinned against heaven and before thee. That's what I call the power of self-talk. He knew how to talk to himself. What do you say when you talk to yourself? It's not popular to say, okay, you've got to talk to yourself. Somebody might think, oh, are you psycho? That's not the point. The point is the power of your inner dialogue. What dialogue is constantly going on in your mind, or in your heart, in your head? You see, he knew how to spot issues. When he came to a place of awareness, he counseled himself. When I talk about the power of self-talk, I'm talking about the power of personal counseling, where you counsel yourself into the good that is awaiting you. You counsel yourself in the positive. The young man said to himself, I will arise and go. He said he began to analyze his own issues, and he spoke to himself in a tender and a positive way, in such a way that he could take action on what he needed to do. So my question to you is this: what do you say when you talk to yourself? How do you dialogue with yourself? Do you pause to counsel yourself? We need to each talk to ourselves. The best counsel you might be able to receive might be the one you give yourself. I have come to realize that when I'm ready to face my issues or things around about me, the best way is to counsel myself, speak to myself in a way no one will be ready or prepared to talk to me, or in a way no one will be prepared or ready to talk to you. So what do you say when you talk to yourself? The power of self-talk. When we come to a place of our personal awakening that will bring about destiny shaping moment, it's a place when we counsel ourselves into the next step we need to take. So don't hesitate to harness the power of self-talk when you come to that moment of awareness. The second thing we saw with this young man is the power of personal decision. He said, I will get up and go to my father. I will get up and I will go to my father. He came to his own eureka moment of the power of his personal decision. He said, I will. That's decision there. It is not necessarily the challenges we face. It is in our ability to be able to come to a place of personal responsibility where we decide our lines of action and we take those decisions seriously and we face things squarely. I think it's Anthony Robbins that says that your destiny is shaped in the moment of your decision. Our destinies are shaped as people at the point of decisions. The rest is history. Once you resolve, you realize you can get going. Your decision is the trigger to the next dimension of your elevation and your enhancement in life. If you are going to experience elevation and enhancement, it is hinged on the next key decision you are going to take. He came to his place of awakening, his place of awareness, and he took a decision. When you talk to yourself, you decide based on your inner resolution. Remember, he said in verse 18, I will get up and I will go to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. So he came to a place of personal decision. Realize the power of your personal decision and use it to your own advantage. Once you decide, things will work in your favor. The third thing we see in the story, is that the awakening to the power of his personal action. So he came to a realization that when he takes action, things will change. The power of your action. He said, I will get up and go. Change will happen when you take your life in your own hands and steer things in the direction of your positive awareness. When you take things in your hand and take the positive action in the positive direction, in the direction you want to go. So, this young man had what I call a bias for action. He was constantly acting when he got a clue in his mind. When there is an idea in your mind, are you prepared to act on it based on your inner resolve? Let's look at those scriptures again in verse 20. He said, so he set off and went to his father. He set off and went to his father. He said it to himself and he did it. So he did not procrastinate. He acted on his own counsel. His action was clear and it was based on an inner resolve. When you act on your inner resolution with the clarity, your personal transformation becomes remarkable. This is what can happen when you come to a place of inner awakening where you speak to yourself, decide on your line of action, and you take those actions with full convictions for your action. Things happen remarkably. It brings about a radical shift in your life. And that's what I want us to see. Overall, the young man in his own story knew how to tap into the power of his personal awakening, resulting to compelling action. So what do you say when you talk to yourself? Is your self-talk building you up or pulling you down? My closing question to you is this. Are you turning your attention inwards long enough to bring about your destiny awakening moment? If you will turn your attention inward long enough, you will find counsel in your own heart. Counsel strong enough to bring about a resolute decision such that you can take clear and positive action that will take you into the next phase of your life. It's been your friend Martin Skatolhi calling you to raise your standard in your core relationships, in your career, and in your calling. Till I come your way again, keep raising the bar of performance you can because you are. Bye for now, and God bless.